In the context of like a higher achiever, I have to fight different fights for my team. And I discovered that is actually something I'm passionate about doing, because when I believe in our work and I believe in our strategy, to me, it's the right thing to do. So I'm ready to go out and have that negotiation. I'm ready to have that difficult conversation with finance or present something to the CEO. And I get really excited for that now, because that is, I guess, a new passion for representing my team and representing our work, which is, that's part of the journey too. But there's some excitement in putting all of those pieces into a puzzle that you can then present back. But I do think your passions evolve, or if they don't, great, then find the role that fits those passions that you want to keep, because that's to me, what keeps me coming back to work.
Leaving your comfort zone is never easy. And while it may not always feel right in the moment, without fail, it is the best way to find the most professional growth. Despite being faced with fear and uncertainty, and not always knowing if a decision is right in the moment, being able to trust your gut and think logically is how you can make the right calls time and time again. Today's guest, Allison Stransky, Chief Marketing Officer and VP of Corporate Marketing for Samsung Electronics America, has lived on the edge of her comfort zone throughout her career with incredibly positive results. In today's episode, she walks us through how she faced those fears and took the leaps of faith needed to go from L'Oréal to Google to Samsung and rise to the executive ranks. By the end of this episode, you'll learn how to tell your career story and the importance of embracing change and the unknown to open up opportunities that you never thought possible. This is episode 12 of Tiffany's podcast. Hey, Allison, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. It's great to have you here. How's your week going so far?
It's great. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, we're off to a great start this week.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And, I just want to kind of start with some of the hard-hitting questions, get them out of the way. But I always love how when seasons are changing, they're really defining a lot of the food that we're eating. So I'm curious, with spring finally here, what's been your go-to transition recipe or dish for the season?
That's a really funny question when you think about the seasons and the transitions. You know what I'm ready for? Anything I can eat outside. My kids wanted to have a picnic on our last great weekend, so I'm ready for food that can be taken outside.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. I think it's that time of year where we are just craving a little bit of fresh air and outside energy. But again, so happy to have you here, Allison. I know you and I go back a little while, and I've just loved witnessing your amazing journey all the way up into your current role right now as CMO and Vice President of Corporate Marketing at Samsung Electronics America. You've had such a beautiful path too, formerly at Google and L'Oréal, and even prior to that at Unilever. So as we kind of start diving in a little bit more, and as you look back on your journey from L'Oréal to Google to Samsung right now, what through line or story do you see that really connects each chapter of your career?
So when I think about my journey, I love brands. And that's actually something that I've observed about myself in my career, is that I love thinking like consumers. I love marketing them. And the throughput, I believe, is that I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working on a lot of brands that a lot of people have also loved. So my responsibility as a marketer has been telling great stories about what I really believe are great brands and great products.
Oh, I love that. Maybe even just building on that a little bit more, because we hear a lot around storytelling and, branding, and it goes beyond just having a logo that's recognizable, right? I'm curious, in your expertise and what you've built so far in these amazing brands, what do you view makes a really great career story, and what also makes a bad one?
Well, I think when it comes to, I guess, a brand or your career, great and bad are so subjective. So I think the bigger question is, are you creating your story that's making you the happiest? So that's kind of more what I want to answer, because you know what? If you wanted to be a doctor and ended up doing what I did, I don't know that it would be a great story, but I'll tell you, I'm not qualified to be a doctor. So I'm happy where I am. I always knew I wanted to be a marketer. Beyond that, I didn't really know where marketing was going to take me. So early on when it was coming to making decisions about companies and roles, I wasn't really thinking about my career as a story. I was thinking about it as the job, the opportunity, the brand.
Mm.
But then somewhere along the way, I realized, maybe it was during a resume update, but I don't know, that it kind of does become your story because it is, um, I've been a marketer for 20 years now, so a significant portion of my life.
Oh my gosh, it's been quite the journey. I'm curious to dive a little deeper on that too, because you mentioned that there was maybe somewhat of an intentional moment that came up where you started realizing that there is a story here. Maybe it didn't become intentional right out of the gate, but with time or maybe kind of seeing the different ebbs and flows of your own career experience, that it almost became more obvious for you. Would you say, Allison, there was like one pivotal moment where that became even clearer in your eyes?
There actually was. It was when I made the decision to leave L'Oréal and go to Google. And the
Mm.
reason that was like, whoa, something is happening. And in my story is it was several things. One, to have gotten that job, it was not the only interview I took. I was looking around at that time period. And when I thought about where I wanted to go from there, I wanted something that was going to elevate me, be different from what I could have done at L'Oreal. And when I thought about the companies and conversations I was having, Google was the most interesting for a number of reasons. So, what it opened my eyes to is that there will be a summary of my career that is, as you said at this introduction, the companies I've worked for: L'Oreal, Unilever, Google, not in that order, but really great global brands. And that was when I said, you know what, if I'm going to leave L'Oreal, I need to leave L'Oreal for something that I think is better. And at that point in time, it was Google. The other element of that decision was that I took a sidestep in terms of the type of role I did. I was a
Mm.
brand marketer at L'Oreal. I worked on all brand businesses, and I took a very different role in Google and was also kind of aware of there's the linear path and then there's the nonlinear path. And I was about to start on my own nonlinear journey with that decision
Mm.
as well.
Ah, that's exciting, but also a little bit scary, I imagine, right? When you're going from a space that you know, and like you said, was very branding focused to transitioning into the tech space, and obviously one of the major giants like a company like Google. What fears came up for you at that moment, if any, and how did you work through that to almost build the confidence and courage to just go for it?
It's funny that you asked the question about when I was thinking about L'Oreal to Google because I felt more fear, if you want to use fear as a word, between Google and Samsung, and I can come back to that one.
Oh.
And when I was ready to leave L'Oreal and go to Google, the advantage of that move and the things that gave me confidence were the reputation of the company, which was very positive. I knew I was going to be going into a very different experience. And so in my head, I felt very ready for it.
Yeah.
However, in hindsight, I will say I took that transition a little bit for granted. And I wish I had been a little bit more scared. And I wished that I'd thought a little bit more about how fast and critical it is to learn the company, learn the culture, learn how things get done. Because I didn't realize after 10 years at L'Oreal, I just knew all of those things
Mm.
innately. And you go into Google, and no company makes it obvious about how you get things done and who you need to know. But you need to put those pieces together as fast as possible. And I went in more excited than scared without realizing that after 10 years at one company, any company, even if they have a great reputation, is going to be a hard change, which is
Mm.
why fast forward to from Google to Samsung, now I was actually experiencing feelings that I will admit were fear because now I knew and I remembered it had only been about 5.5 years at Google. I remembered that you have to figure out who knows what, how do you get things done, what are the internal politics, and I was like, oh, here we go again. Here's the big transition coming.
Never a dull
But
moment.
yes, but I think that fear, and I'll admit that it was that worked in my favor to be aware of it more the second time around.
I mean, I so appreciate you being so open about that and acknowledging in the moment where you could have maybe done something a little bit differently or perhaps more actively in those initial weeks and maybe months within entering Google at the time. How do you find that changed how you showed up in your transition into Samsung, but also coming in at a C-level position, which in itself has its own set of expectations and responsibilities? Do you find that that elevated the fear for you in a way of like, okay, this is not only a new company, it's a new level of my own career growth. And obviously there's a lot of eyes on me right now.
Absolutely. So that was I stepped into a bigger role, which, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity. People do make different steps of different sizes at different phases. And so I guess I can say took two kind of significant steps between L'Oreal and Google and Samsung in that they were such different moves. But yes, exactly what you said were the things that weighed on me in the getting ready to show up and be as effective as possible. Plus, I have a larger team now. And so there are a lot of people who count on me. And that's a responsibility too, because part of my role is to make sure I'm setting all of them up for success. I'm representing their work as well as possible. And getting my head around all of those elements was like, okay, are you ready for this? Are you ready?
How long would you say for you, Allison, was that like learning curve to kind of feel like you had a really good handle on things coming into your role at Samsung?
I had, I'll tell you, the most intensive was the first 6 weeks because I don't even remember, second, third day, the CEO said, "So when can I see your plan?" And it was
Just started. Quick reminder over
literally,
here.
it was by lucky circumstance that it took us 6 whole weeks to get a meeting on the calendar. I had a little bit of a grace period. And so that was a really intensive period to say, well, what's the status of the team? What do I want to change? How can I get alignment? And how can I present this alignment among my peers back to them and the CEO? So that was my first 6 weeks. The prior CEO would also tell you that you do get a 6-month grace period so that he knows that there's a learning window.
Yeah.
But I've had people tell me behind closed doors that you really need 3 years to learn the ins and outs of this place. And I'm coming up on 2 years next month. So I
Wow.
do kind of think I'm also only 2/3 through a big part of my learning journey. So I like to think, a year from now, I'm going to look back. Every time I have a new, I didn't see that coming experience, or I haven't been through this before, I check a box and I'm like, well, next time you go through this, it won't be the first time that time. So I'm assuming there is some magic to the 3-year learning curve that people have said is Samsung. And, I think a lot of companies are probably, there's the initial, you have a short window. There's the 6-month, which I think is kind of universally given. And then there's the how long to really maximize your impact and effectiveness.
Oh, yeah. That's so helpful, the way that you're viewing that, Allison. Thanks for sharing that. Because I think it's always so ambiguous sometimes when you're coming into a new role and especially for high achievers and, a lot of our community here, they're go-getters. They want to bring out their best in their career. A lot of the clients that we serve, they are really working on bringing out their best selves at every stage of their career journey. And so I think hearing that's in a way very comforting and also assuring to give yourself that grace and know that there's going to be those moments that will still feel like that learning curve, but also not taking for granted the moments where you can really step up and deliver and do that sooner than later as well. I do want to come back to something you were sharing earlier, Allison, around kind of the story piece and crafting that career story and what that's looked like for you, because I also know mindset plays a big role in this, the stories we tell ourselves, the narrative in our mind. And was there ever a time for you in your career where you almost had to rewrite the story that you were telling yourself? And how did that shift open up a door to a next opportunity? Or did it?
Yes, I'll say yes to first answer your question and thinking back on Google in particular, because prior to going to Google, I had about 13, 14 years of traditional brand marketing experience. and I liked it. I wanted to be a brand marketer. And then back to this nonlinear journey. When I had the opportunity to go to Google, I told myself I was taking my marketing hat to a tech org because I was going to be client facing on the Google side. My first role was running a team that we called Brand Lab, and you worked with clients to take a brief and answer their big business challenge using the suite of Google products and everything at our disposal, primarily YouTube. So that was what I wanted to do. Amazing team, amazing companies that we worked with. So that was obviously the carrot. But I did not realize when I stepped over that I was going to play in my head. I was a marketer who was taking this alternative direction, but I very quickly became what Google says you are, which evolved over the years too, as that team evolved and changed into other things. So fast forward 5 years in my Google journey, I started as the head of Brand Lab New York, and then Brand Lab was rolled into another team, Unskippable Labs, and I became the head of strategy and operations. And then after that, I got moved into the Google go-to-marketing org, which is an org that runs parallel to the business unit. And I just got a little bit farther and a little bit farther from what I did as a brand marketer. So in my head, I was like, I'm a brand marketer doing a strategy and operations GTM role. Interesting. This was a journey. Now, the story that I told myself the whole time, and story fact, whatever you want to call it, is like in my core, I know I'm a marketer. So I never stopped bringing that marketer's lens to what I did. However, a lot of my peers actually had a background in consulting and loved where they ended up at Google because they are now kind of doing internal consulting in a really big, amazing machine. So they loved it. And I thought differently, did presentations and decks a little bit differently. And sometimes we were learning from each other. I shouldn't say sometimes. We were always learning from each other. But in hindsight, I was learning a lot more than I realized. And so therefore, sometimes I was consciously learning and other times unconsciously, I guess I could say. So all of that to say, fast forward back to the creation of a story. Coming up on my end of tenure at Google, I was interested in going back to brand because at about 5 years, it was like, this has been a great journey. I'm now more conscious of the unconscious learning that I've picked up along the way, but I have to follow my heartstrings. So now the story that I'm telling myself, telling people externally has kind of evolved because back to that nonlinear journey, how have I strengthened myself as a marketer, not how have I strengthened myself to be a go-to-market operations excellence or excel in go-to-market operations, but how did all of these things and these steps make me a better marketer at the end of the day was kind of the next chapter in my story.
I mean, that is so helpful because I think as our listeners and viewers are watching this, that might be at a point in their career too of what's next or what does that next pivot look like for me or I want something a little bit different. We could almost like box ourselves in like the story we tell ourselves. And I really love the way that you just walked us through that, Allison, of how you kind of knew at the core it always came back to the marketing side of things, but you almost gave yourself those permissions to stretch and see how that can actually apply in different areas of your work and different companies that you've been a part of, and also recognize when you kind of want to come back to your roots a little bit and be authentic to yourself in that way too. Were there any kind of practical ways that you found that was showing up in your day-to-day that kind of gave you that sense of comfort, and especially transitioning from Google into Samsung and kind of seeing that come maybe a little bit full circle that helped you?
Yeah, that was amazing coming back to the other side because when you talk about all of the unconscious learning that's going on, that was when I really think I realized how much I picked up at Google was coming to make another step again where you need a whole new skill set and type of and ways of working. Where a lot of what I picked up in the go-to-market space at Google brought me structure and some foundations using data to sell a business case or make a point, which was actually very much aligned to how Samsung thinks.
Mm.
So it really did help in that transition. And I do appreciate, it's not lost on me that Google opened a door, which was something that I was very happy to have opened for me. But yes, you kind of look back and you say, wow, this cumulative effect of how these things have added up, and you don't necessarily know in the moment. I will be
Mm.
honest, when I look back, some of my best learning actually came when I was the most uncomfortable in my position, because I think in those moments you're getting stretched in a way that you're not necessarily liking at that moment. But once you stretch yourself, you're better for it and you've learned from it. So when I look back on literally the full duration of my career, some of the places where I've learned the most, I have liked the least in those days. But then you actually forget that too. And you're like, that was a great role. That was amazing because I learned so much stuff.
Oh my gosh.
I guess you rewrite your story as you go.
I mean, how relatable is that? I totally identify with that too. And I say it often, our biggest growth moments are the ones where we do feel the most uncomfortable because it really pushes you to maybe see a side of yourself that you didn't realize. But I love that you just kind of brought to the surface that in those moments, sometimes it doesn't feel that good, or sometimes it feels really uneasy. Is there one that's really top of mind for you, Allison, that just thinking of it, you're like, oh gosh, yes. Although I've moved past it, I still kind of feel that pain. And would you be able to walk us through that a little bit?
You know what I was reflecting on recently was my first sidestep within L'Oréal. I was running the Garnier hair color team in the US and I loved it. I think everybody has a moment in their career where you're like, I think I could just do this forever. This is great. And I was in that phase and that role. And then L'Oreal came to me and said, we're starting a new team. We want you to move to this team. And I was like, do you? Must you?
Sure about that.
Do I have to? Um, and they made a really good pitch to me, which was to say the team that they were standing up was the shopper marketing team. And the thing they were trying to solve for was to bring more marketing insights and expertise to the sales team through the
Oh,
shopper function. So when you sell it like that, and we want you to bring your marketing expertise to the sales team, and by the way, this will be really good for you because you will learn about sales and being in the frontline sales position without actually being on the front line. What do you think? And I was like, okay, yes, now I'll take it. So the role
oh,
that I started in the shopper marketing team was running the shopper marketing CVS account. And what was really special about CVS is how much they know about us as consumers from our shopper data, from your extra care rewards. And a lot of people joke about the length of those receipts, but it was actually a lot of data and personalization that went into that. So in the moment, it was not my favorite role because the types of marketing, the creativity that I could bring, I felt was much more limited than
mm,
when I was on the brand side. And on the brand side, you're setting the vision, you're building all of the direction. And then you're cascading it to the shopper team to have it that in-store consistency. So now I like to create, but I'm on the receiving end. So I'm receiving all of this from the marketing team, and I need to bring it to life in CVS. But the magic becomes the data, which was the other little carrot that they gave me in selling this role, is that CVS at that time, among all of the retailers that we were working with, was the most advanced in their data capabilities. So
mm,
did a lot of work with CVS to understand different shopper insights, what moved for each of the brands I was working on between Maybelline, Garnier, and Essie. They were a little bit different, so we had some different opportunities. Um, and then fast forward, looking back, however you want to say it, that was my first real data role.
mm,
Fast forward to the opportunity at Google, I really think that that position opened the door at Google because we were using big data and working with data in a whole other way that I had a good foundation that I didn't even realize I'd built. Fast forward to Samsung, within my org is the big data team. Like, we are responsible for
Wow.
not just keeping all the data, but helping all of our marketing partners use that data. And so it goes back to a role where I honestly remember being jealous of the marketing teams who were creating the work that I was just manipulating into in-store signage and emails. But I was picking up something else and a different skill set that has actually kind of become a throughput theme or narrative for my career as well.
Oh, this is amazing. I'm just taking it all in. I think there's so many gems of what you've just shared there, Allison, of
Mhm.
one, like gaining learnings from moments that might not feel the most comfortable and not seeing it as a setback, a failure, a bad decision, but like, no, there's something here. I'm here for a reason. What can I gain from that that will impact me positively for any next step that I choose to take? I think the other thing is also giving yourself those moments of reflection and appreciation in the hardship that you have gone through, or sometimes those slight moments that might feel like misalignment, but it's actually redirection to something even better for yourself. And
Yes.
not always picking that up in the moment, right? But seeing how it actually is intentional and it can help you down the line. Maybe it's like a similar vein to that, because we're talking a lot about kind of that story and how it's evolved for you, Allison. Is there a difference in your mind around the story you tell yourself, but also the story that you tell other people?
I'm not sure if there is. I say consciously, I don't think there is, but then you'll have to fact check me and see if that jives. The reason I say that is because, at least for right now, I'm very happy to be where I am, and there's still a lot of work that I can do on this team. So every day is hard, every day is challenging, but every day is exciting, and every day we're doing good work. So, like, those are all the boxes that I'm checking. So back to the initial story that I tell myself, but also tell outwardly, is that I'm a marketer who loves brands, loves to tell stories, loves to uncover insights that we can bring to consumers. So that is the biggest thing, which makes me think that the stories are consistent.
Yeah.
What I will say is, the stuff that excited me about this role and this opportunity is not necessarily where I spend most of my time. It's actually probably where I spend some of the least of my time, is creating those stories and building those insights. But it is the piece that brought me back and got me the most excited to come back to a true marketing role. So that's why I think the
Mm,
internal and the external story are pretty well aligned, maybe
yeah.
not 100%.
No, that sounds about right. I think that's a really good way of framing it. And I mean, you mentioned boxes, so let's stay on that
Yeah.
for a second, because I think one thing that you've done really well, Allison, is transitioning across some like pretty wildly different industries, whether tech, beauty, consumer electronics. What's your advice to someone who is feeling boxed in their current role or industry, or feeling like this is all I know? There's, a next step for me, but how would I even go about that? Can that feeling of being boxed in play well into someone's story, do you find?
If you're feeling boxed in, I think you can always find an opportunity in there. I don't know if the box is part of the story. I'd be interested in hearing somebody who's turned feeling boxed as the story itself into the next opportunity. But there's something for you in that box. And what I mean by that is, I've found, as I've changed industries, they actually look to each other more than I realized in the moment. So
Mm,
Google admired L'Oreal, L'Oreal admired Google, Samsung admires both of those. Like, and for various reasons. So they're all leaders in their respective fields. So there's a level of, Google's the biggest tech, L'Oreal's the biggest in beauty. Like, they're doing something right that can be learned from. But then there's also, all of these are based in storytelling, because I would call both tech and beauty luxury products. Maybe there are some things that we need, but we don't need any of them the way we need food and water. So
right.
there's an element of desire that you have to sell. They're also very proliferated markets, like it comes down to a lot of choice. So storytelling comes in. And so that was, to me, if we go back to the box, I think what you find within your box is what is your unique value, your unique skill set, or what have you been exposed to that somebody outside of your box is interested in? Because
Mm.
I never would have thought that Samsung looked to L'Oréal as a great parallel. But then in my recruiting process, they're like, no, L'Oréal people do great here. Yeah, glad you told me
Oh,
that.
how fun.
It was a great connection that others have observed as well.
Oh, I see, like I sense this connecting of the dots. That
Mhm.
doesn't always seem so obvious, but that's such a cool way of thinking about it. And also, sometimes just not assuming what others might view or perceive as a stage in a career or a next step in a career, and that there's actually a lot more that we can learn from each other across industries than we might realize in the moment. And that's a pretty amazing realization to have because I often share this with even our community, our clients that we support that are making these shifts in their career around the transversality that can actually be brought one to the next. But you have to lean into that. Like it does come with your story and the storytelling and how you're packaging that together so it doesn't feel accidental, but it actually feels very intentional. And one thing that you've also shared earlier, Allison, around being passionate, really being passionate about marketing and branding. I'm curious how you define passion in the context of maybe like a high achieving or high pressure career. And for anyone that's watching this, like how can they reignite their own passion when it feels like it might have become stagnant for them?
Mhm. I think passion has also, yeah, it certainly evolves when your role evolves. Back to actually what we were talking about previously with the thing I wanted to come back and do was make great creative work. And that's probably about 25% of my time or like one day a week worth of my time, which is like, so what are you doing on the other 4 days if that's about how the allocation is? And I think I find passion or have found passion for new things, which I didn't even really realize. So
Mm.
when in the context of like a higher achiever or a bigger role, like where I am on the executive leadership team at Samsung, is I have to fight different fights or different negotiations for my team. And I discovered that is actually something I'm passionate about doing too.
Mm.
Because when I believe in our work and I believe in our strategy, to me, it's the right thing to do. So I'm ready to go out and have that negotiation. I'm ready to go push whatever needs to be pushed or negotiate with my peers to get something done or have that difficult conversation with finance or present something to the CEO. And I get really excited for that now because that is, I guess, a new passion for representing my team and representing
Mm.
our work, which has become a new type of excitement. Um, and I think I've found my way of doing it, which is, that's part of the journey too, is how do you set up that this is the right thing for the strategy? How do you relate to your stakeholders so that they see it's the right thing for their needs? And how do you bring everybody along on this journey? But there's some excitement in putting all of those pieces into a puzzle that you can then present back. And I'm sure there are other things too, but I do think your passions evolve, or if they don't, great, then find the role that fits those passions that you want to keep, because that's to me, what keeps me coming back to work too.
Mm. This is so fascinating. I think one thing that's really sticking out to me from what you just shared is that your learnings can actually become new passions, right? Sometimes we feel like, the follow your passion or that it has to be something that's like so ingrained in us from a long time ago or something that we've always loved in our life or our upbringing. But I think one thing that you're just bringing really much to the front here is you can actually develop more passions because you're growing, you're evolving in your own career, and there might be things that you never thought you'd really be passionate about. And now here you are, like totally leading those negotiations and being there with your team and in the way that they really need. So I think that's a great inspiration for people to take back that are tuning in and thinking about their role and roles, maybe even a different light of what new passions might stem from that. Or maybe it's driving them in a direction that is something they haven't leaned into as much, but now actually want to be bolder and more courageous in that direction. I'm also curious because coming back to what you shared a little earlier about that shopper marketing role and that didn't feel necessarily as obvious in the moment. Maybe it's that example, but was there ever a role that you had, Allison, that you said yes to, even if it didn't look like the perfect fit on paper, but it did feel right? And how did that play out for you?
There were several, and so therefore that was probably the first one where I was like, yes, because, but it didn't all check all the boxes. But I think whether it was that one or another one was within Google when I moved from doing strategy and operations for a creative team into the go-to-market org. It was like, why are we moving? Am I doing the same role or is this a different role? What was the motivation for this? And in that particular case, they said the motivation was to give me access to resources and people and ways of working that would make me more effective in my role. And so
Mm,
that was another interesting. Are you telling me I'm going to do the same thing on a different team, or are you telling me I'm going to do a different thing? I'm not totally clear, but you're telling me my role is going to change. Yes? So in that was just another moment of in that particular case, there wasn't a discussion for yes or no. It was like, hey, we decided this is happening. Um, but you look back, and so I think that's a consistent is you look back and say, I figured out what I needed to learn from this or what I
yes.
needed to create from this. And, there's a learning curve in every single one of these transitions. You're always back to your 6 weeks, 6 months, 3 years. Um,
Yes.
although I can't say that every single position, they don't all last 3 years. So maybe you always your 6 months and 6 weeks. But, yeah, I think in the moment when you've not been a fully maybe that's even a better transition in hindsight, talk about learning in the moment. You look back and say, I had to find what I liked about this. I had to find why I'm doing this. And then those are the moments that you're uncomfortable, stretch, grow, learn.
This is so important. You're reminding me, Allison, because we just supported one of our clients recently who's transitioned into a chief of staff role. And a lot of what you're sharing is so relevant with this because even for her in that next step, which was scary and a new step, but she's like, I think I'm ready for it. But there was also some lack of clarity of what she's going to gain from that versus her prior role. And so I always love kind of leaning into the what's in it for you and making sure that clarity is very much there. Even if
Mhm.
like the step might feel a little bit different, maybe not as obvious in going into that next role, at least getting that clarity, asking the clarifying questions, or to your point, being very intentional of like, what are you going to gain from that? That can serve as a springboard, a next step for whatever follows. It brings a lot more out of the role. And then to your point around the timeline management, right? Like those first weeks, that first year, everything beyond that, you can actually become a lot more strategic of what you're hoping to achieve by those milestones. So I love how that kind of brings it back to what you're sharing, Allison, and how you've leaned into that. I mean, you've done some incredible work already. I can't believe it's been almost 2 years at Samsung. I feel like it was like yesterday when we were chatting and you were transitioning into that role. But I mean, huge congrats first off for all of the
Thank
incredible
you.
work you're doing there. And as you think about the impact that you're creating within the company, what do you believe is your unique edge or like secret sauce? And how did you come to recognize that and own it and use it as a value across the different teams that you've been leading?
So I would say what I think my secret sauce is at this point is the ability to create a strategy and package it in a story that brings my peers, my stakeholders, everybody along for the journey. Because I really think we are all marching towards the same, I'm the marketing team, so I'm not the whole strategy, but like in my space, I think I've got the rest of the org believing in our vision,
Mm,
which has been critical. But I think you get them there by one, taking baby steps, because I've been talking with my team about how I think we're moving into the 3.0 era of corporate marketing, which is to say the 1.0 looked like this, then we evolved. I think we need to evolve again. And in order to make more better work that drives the broader business objectives, we're ready for it. We're ready to do it. And then, so that's how you need time to see where the business is going to create your relevant strategy. But then the secret sauce is how you package it and tell the story, because it's not just yours, it's everybody, it's all of your
Hmm.
stakeholders. Your vision needs to help them meet their needs. And I think that's something I've been able to build as a strength. And it comes from, you recognize it in a number of ways. One is it kind of pays off when you see it happen. But two, sometimes people tell you, and like they say feedback is a gift, but it kind of is. And I've appreciated that I've had people from other teams say, we've seen you do this well, and we've learned from it too. And the first time somebody said that, I was like, wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that. And you've observed that and found value in that. Thank you so much for coming back and telling me.
Uh,
But it was also kind of in that similar um, packaging of a strategy and telling the story space.
mm, that's so insightful. Thank you for sharing that. It's a great frame for people to lean into and recognize in those moments some of the things that you're like tactically and strategically doing, but also tying it back to how that impacts other people and making sure there's a good connectivity there. Because that's also not always so obvious, and we can get like kind of head down. Obviously, operating at an executive level like you are, Allison, it just takes things to a whole different level of decision making and strategic vision and critical thinking and all of that. So I really appreciate how you just kind of brought that together in the way that you show up for
Thank
yourself
you.
and also your teams. Maybe for anyone that's struggling to articulate what makes them different or valuable, I know a lot of the time as like female professionals, we tend to discount, what makes us unique, or it's just part of my job, or, oh, I was just expected to do this, right? It's always those what feels like an innocent excuse, but it's actually minimizing our differentiators. So is there a certain starting point that you recommend to explore what makes us different, what makes us valuable, or any frameworks or exercises that helped you to do that for yourself?
I think it starts by looking around and like, what do you do that you can see other people value and appreciate? And then beyond that, I think it's certainly, don't be afraid to ask. I can't say that I have a framework, but you can certainly ask for feedback from managers, peers, etc. Because I think other people will, I hope, be happy to articulate, which would give you a little bit of a sense. It varies at varying stages of your career. When I think back to my very early days, I had a lot of passion for literally just writing business reports, which is, I don't know if that is normal or not, but in marketing, it needs to be done. So I'm sure glad I liked doing it, because then I started proactively sharing things that I found in the reporting. And I was constantly pulling numbers and
Mm,
sharing them with leadership. And I used to have a joke with my boss. I used to say, "You want some fun facts?" And he goes, "They're not fun facts, they're business results." I'm like, "Well, when they're good, they're fun." So, that was kind of the foundation of finding something that it was important to the business. It was something I kinda liked doing, and I could add value by going above and beyond just writing the weekly share reports.
mm,
And then I think it kind of evolves from there in, like, different stages of your career, you add value in different ways. But now looking to my team, I love that everybody has their own unique perspective, especially if you are younger, you've grown up in a tech first social media world. Tell me about it. Maybe that's where your uniqueness is. My data team thinks so differently from the way I think. There's uniqueness everywhere, but I think when you look to the people who have similar and different skill sets within your team, within your org, there's
mm,
some kind of combination of what do you like to do? What are you good at? Maybe what is somebody else not doing, because your uniqueness
yes.
will be more valuable if it's in some white space.
Yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it. And I will even add maybe another one that I find is sometimes like a blind spot for people, that something that you're really naturally good at that like comes very easy to you, that could absolutely be one of your biggest differentiators. It's
That's a
sometimes
great one.
yeah, because sometimes we feel like, oh, but I like this, like, isn't this easy for everyone? It like our head goes there and it's like, no, It's actually not easy for everyone, but it's easy for you because you're so good at it, or it just comes really naturally. Like with your example, Allison, of doing business reports. I remember in my time at L'Oreal as well, like I actually genuinely enjoyed doing that. But there are a lot of people who are like, oh gosh, like that's not my thing. I don't really want to do that, but I know I have to, right? And so sometimes just thinking about the things that do come naturally that are easy for you, don't dismiss them. Like that could be exactly where the magic is that you actually want to elevate and play to your strengths even more. I'm also a little curious, in terms of the career decisions that you've made for yourself and the way that it's really carried your career from company to company or industry to industry. Did you weigh like instinct versus logic? Or like, how did you do that? Was there almost like a gut check that you always came back to before making a leap? I'm curious if any of that kind of came up for you in those decisions.
I think you follow your gut first because I think you really should. I've heard other people say this. I really believe in it. You should be running towards your next opportunity, not running away from something. And that I think is the first gut check of, am I excited about where I'm going, or am I just relieved to be getting out of my situation? So I think you start with the gut, but then you have to have the logic come in. And do I know what I'm getting into? Like, did I ask all of the questions that I needed to ask? Were they able to answer the questions that I asked? Get really honest opinions by asking people who don't work there anymore if you can, because they have no
No bias, no
they
filter
have no
anymore.
yeah, exactly. They're allowed to tell you exactly as it is. And that doesn't mean anyone else's, it's your decision to make, but it's all feedback and perspective that you can
Right.
collect. And so I think that's where the logic comes in. Do I understand the role that I'm going to be doing, and will I feel the right type of challenge, the right type of excited? And so I think it's both gut and logic, but it's almost a one and then a two, because if your gut's not feeling good, you shouldn't over logic. Like there's something there.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it's just even feeling like genuinely excited. Like you might not be fully certain of what that looks like or what the next steps will be able to come to fruition with once you make that next move. But if that genuine excitement is there, chances are it's like pulling you towards it for a reason. I love these kind of gut check though questions that you've just shared, Allison. So I know there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this that are thinking about their next move, their next pivot, whether internally or externally from their existing company. And they might not be sure like how that translates into their next story or what that might look like for them. Where do you think they should begin, or like what kinds of questions could they ask themselves to get clearer on what that story looks like?
That's a great question. And I think it starts with what you're excited about doing. So I think the first step is look internally. And I will tell you, I actually had a friend call me recently who's going through this journey, and I was really excited that she reached out. She's a full-time mom who is now ready. Her kids are of an age. She's ready to go back into the workforce. And she's like, I'm just looking for perspective about where to start. So we talked about was like, when you look at what you've done, and this is my advice to everybody, returning mom, changing careers, whatever the case may be, because it's kind of the journey that I found that I was on myself, is like, what do you get the most excited about? Like, if you look at all the work that you've done, what gets you the most jazzed? Where are you the most leaned in? What parts of your role have you enjoyed the most? And then how can you position that into something a company will value? So when I looked at my own Google to Samsung change, we were using data to make better creative on the creative teams at Google. And so I had an understanding of the process. I had an understanding of the importance of creative, and Samsung had an interest in that learning as well. So that was for me a really relevant bridge that I was able to build. So then positioning it into something that a company will value. But I think part of that is also what type of roles value those things that you like to do. Can you find that there are a series of roles out there that fit this type of work? To go back to my friend, I was thinking about her earlier when you talked about somebody stepping into a chief of staff role, was that we actually came to the conclusion that the work that she likes doing the most is kind of in chief of staff space. And I was like, well,
Mm.
that's great because that is a title that you can look for. Is
Yes.
it social media manager? Is it in CRM? Is it in data? Like, I think you'll find the buzzwords. And then when you see the types of roles that are out there, and then those are the puzzle pieces that
Mm.
you put together and find what to look for. I don't think, I think it's pretty rare, I guess I should say, that you find everything that checks all of your boxes, which is why I think the role type comes in handy of
Yes.
you'll find the thing that checks most of your boxes. And then the company research, because chief of staff is not the same in every location. Like, is
Mm.
that a thing that your definition of chief of staff in this company, are you going to find that pairing together? So that's sort of the personal process that I realized I went through in the Google to Samsung transition, and how I
Mm.
hope I can offer people value as they think about their journey too.
Oh my gosh, it's so valuable, Allison. And even coming back to one thing you shared earlier about talking to people in, those target roles or those target companies, even ones who don't work there anymore, to get really the full picture. There's such a power of relationships and leaning on others who can also help inform your decision making. So I'm curious for you, Allison, who or what helped you see a bigger version of yourself than what you once thought possible? And how did that relationship, if it was a relationship that you had, shape your confidence to take those
Mhm.
leaps? Like, any advice that you'd have to someone who wants to seek out that kind of feedback?
So I think I've been fortunate to collect some great mentors along the way, and a number of people who I've worked for or worked with, but then also people that I've met through my alumni network and other places who I've just executives I'd admired who we have one person in common who I've asked to be introduced to. So I feel fortunate that, back to your point about relationships, I've kept up relationships so that when I've had the opportunity to make a change, I've also had people who I can call. So
Mm.
one does come to mind because, when I was thinking through deciding, and now it'll be out there, my team will know. I wasn't sure that I was ready to say yes to Samsung. And I called a lot of people and asked for feedback. Um, and one who stood out was a former manager of mine who I had at L'Oréal. And she was the one who just like called it like it is. And she goes, all I hear is you're scared. And scared is
Mm.
not a good reason. Um, to not move forward. And so I think there's a lot of value in finding those mutual perspectives and getting a lot of different opinions, because I'll tell you, after that one, I talked to somebody else who the reason I think I was a little scared is that I had at the time a 6-month-old at home. And I
Ugh.
was like, am I ready to step into a bigger job with a little baby? And I talked to someone else who was like, you don't have to be right now. It is totally fine if you don't want a bigger role with a little one. And that is perfectly respectable too.
Mm.
And in the combination of those two sets of feedback, I was like, you're right, I am scared, but I also want it. And if I want it, even right now, I should stamp that fear down and go for it.
Mm.
And so back to, I think it's great to have perspectives and people that you can call on. And
Yes.
I've found that executives and people that you've worked with in your career love to give advice, because when you're asking for advice, you're actually paying them a compliment that they have valuable knowledge or valuable perspective. So I've also gotten a lot more comfortable just sending those notes and saying, hey,
Yeah.
up against a thing. Can I get your thoughts?
Absolutely. And I'm sure making it win-win too, where you bring value the other way and it doesn't feel like one-sided exchanges, but really genuine relationships that you've nurtured over the years. And I will add also, Allison, because I know that feeling, when you are stepping into like a pretty major new role, your life has changed dramatically. You have, little children to care for. And in the spirit of, stories and storytelling and the stories of our own careers, it's also really fun to think about the story that you can tell your child of that moment that was scary for you. But you also wanted to set the example of going after what you want and going after your passions and going after what drives you, even when it feels scary.
Good.
So I'm sure, I know they're still
Yeah.
young, but like in hindsight, some years down the line, Allison, you're going to look back at that moment and be like, heck yes, I did the thing. And I want to set that example for those that I love and care for most in my life. And sometimes it's fun thinking about those stories, both on a professional level and on a personal level. I'm so happy that it brought you into this role as CMO at Samsung. And maybe on that note, as of stories, what signals do you look for in talent that tells you they have a clear story versus those who might still be figuring it out right now?
I think those who look like they have it, and hopefully it's more than looks like, hopefully truly have that vision for themselves together, can articulate what they like to do, what they want to bring, what value they can add, but they don't necessarily, you don't ask those questions in that direct way, but you find it in the conversation.
Yeah.
The opposite side of that coin, I think, is when I hear, I just really want to work at Samsung because it's a great company. And if you are chasing something like that, I don't know if you know how you fit, so I don't see how you fit. Like, help me see
Mm,
you here, and then that's how we can bring it together. And it's okay that maybe maybe it's not the right fit too, because you'll be the right fit somewhere else. But yeah, I think your story is clear and comes together when you know your value, you know your interest, you know what's unique about you, and you
yes.
articulate it as such.
Uh, I'm so happy you emphasized that, Allison, because we do a lot of this work with our clients too, in like networking strategy and reach out strategy. And I always say, like, don't leave it to the other person, whether it's in an interview or a networking chat, to like assume what you want. Because that's one, it's a heavy lift for the other person to figure that out for you. They don't know you as well as you know yourself. And two, like, it's your duty to direct that conversation and bring insights that can also help them envision you in the company, in a role, not just short term, but longer term. So I really appreciate that that's something that you pick up on quite a lot in your teams or new team members that you're bringing on. And I think that's a great takeaway for our viewers as well. Maybe as we round out here, Allison, looking back at your incredible career that's just continuing to unfold before our eyes, what's one thing that you wish you stopped doing when it comes to managing your career, and one thing that you wish you did a little bit more of?
I would, hmm, I'll start with what I'd like to do more of. I would like to do more outreach for more perspective on an ongoing basis. I wish I had made time or continue to make time for just checking in. I will be honest that I am very comfortable reaching out to somebody when I have a specific question, or most likely when I don't know what to do in a situation and you're calling for, back to that point about advice.
Yeah.
So I think doing more of that on an ongoing basis, with, like, you never know when you get great nuggets of perspective from everybody. I wish, I'm thinking
Mm,
about all those mentors that I ran through my head right now, and I'm like, I would love to just do a check-in and say, here's how it's going. So that is the one thing that I would like to have done more of. I guess wish I could do less is, I know I should know better in one of those uncomfortable moments, but nobody likes it when you're in it. You still don't like it,
yeah.
even if you can look back and learn from it. So I think I wish I did less worrying in the moment, because all
Mm,
of that worry is negative energy that's just distracting. You're gonna get through it. If I could tamper it down, I'll get through it faster. I'll get to the learning
yes.
faster. So that'll be my do more and do less.
That's good. And even when you think about it too, Allison, like some of those moments of like the do less, they actually were really impactful for your trajectory in some way or another. So that hindsight, it's always, hindsight's always 2020, but what a fun learning though to bring forward now and kind of keep that at the top of your mind. Oh my gosh, Allison, I want to thank you so much for everything
Thank
that you were
you.
able to share in today's episode. So valuable, so many inspiring takeaways that I know our viewers are really going to appreciate in applying in their own career. And I have a
Mm.
feeling they might, want to reach out or thank you for the episode. Is there a place that they could find you if they wanted to do that?
Yes, LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I love what I learn from it too, and connect with people. So please.
Oh, amazing. Well, thank you. We'll share that in the show notes as well. And for anyone who has been listening into this episode, I would also personally really love to know, what were your biggest takeaways from what we discussed today with Allison? Let us know, drop it in the comments or hit me up on social media and let me know there, whatever is easier. And if you're also at a point in your career where you're looking to land a better role and grow more, show up with better confidence and earn more along the way, I would also love to chat with you and see how we can support you further in that. You can actually just go right over to my website and book a session with me and my team so we can get to know you a little bit more and where you're at in your career and go from there. But I also want to thank our amazing guest today, Allison, for taking time to be here and share these invaluable insights with us. Be sure to also subscribe. We have some amazing episodes coming, so you definitely don't want to miss a beat. We have them coming out every single week, and I'm just so excited, Allison, for everyone to take in the amazing golden nuggets that you've shared today. And honestly, again, huge congrats on getting to this incredible point in your own career. I'm so excited to see what continues to unfold in these next steps, and I know we'll definitely be keeping in touch as that evolves.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
Of course.